Hey, good morning. We are waiting for a couple of more people. We'll start in next 2 minutes. Waiting for Kumar and Sumant, I guess. Sumant is there. Okay. Shall we start or should we wait for others? Am I audible to any one of you, please?
Yes, audible.
And then why you people are not responding? This is a meeting. It's not like a religious ceremony. Yeah, Kumar is joining. Right. So we are now 5 people. Pawan may or may not join. He was not there yesterday also. Is Sumant here?
Yes, Krishna.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize your surname yet. Perfect. Right. So I think we should start the session now. So yesterday we looked at the basics of ReactJS. We have seen the definition of a ReactJS component, especially a static-based component, in the sense a stateless component. It was not behaving at all. Even when we have those drop-down boxes and other things, even when we select any of them also, it is not responding. It's because we did not have any behavior injected into the system yesterday. In today's session, we'll be looking at how we can add also behavior to the system or to the ReactJS application. Let me share my screen. Right. Please let me know once the screen is visible to you.
Yes, Krishna.
It is visible.
Very good. Do you see presentation slide also?
Yes.
Perfect. Just give me a moment. Let me stop the video. Right. So this is second part, as we have seen. These are all like what we know already. So the agenda is to understand what do we mean by stateful component, state management using hooks, and working with state variables, state mutators, handling forms and form events, handling asynchronous operations, and establishing propagation from child to parent. Yesterday we have seen how do we propagate properties from parent to child. Today we'll be seeing how we can establish a kind of communication from child to parent using whatever we are going to learn today. So let's first look at a bit of theory. Just one slide, don't bother. So stateful component, what is it? Let's try to understand. So ReactJS supports both stateless as well as stateful components. What we have seen yesterday or in the first part was about stateless components. It never changes its state. Right? A stateless component never changes its state. Whereas a stateful component changes its state in response to one or other trigger. A stateful component move from one state to another state, but for that to happen, there should be a trigger. It is not that just like that it changes the state. If there is a trigger, in response to the trigger, a component may change its state. What do we mean by changing the state with respect to user interfaces? Maybe when we click on submit button, the form may be the form may disappear and some other screen may appear. That means our application's state is changing. Maybe whatever is in the blue color background, if we change background by clicking some button or something, it may change it to yellow color black background. That's also a state change. In yesterday's application, nothing was changing. We had just a screen and it was just, we are looking at it and that guy is looking at us. That's it. Nothing was happening. When something happens in response to these triggers, we say the application is behaving, or our React components are becoming more like stateful components. Interesting thing is that both stateful components as well as stateless components can be defined as just functions. Yesterday we have seen a stateless component being defined as a function. Even stateful components also, we can make them as functions. It was not the case before. Till the version 16, stateful components are defined or were defined as classes. Means you need to know a bit about object orientation, classes, inheritance, all such kind of stuff. It is a little bit challenging for the UI developers because traditionally the UI developers comes from a background that is HTML, CSS. They were not really involved in developing very mission critical applications. So it is not expected that UI people know about object orientation and all such kind of heavyweight stuff. So since the 16th version or after 16, I do not exactly remember, but around that version, since that version, ReactJS moved on from class-based components to completely function-based components. So whether it is stateful or stateless, it is just a function. One way to understand the React stateful components are as if like they are state machines. You all know state machines, right? You're all from engineering background. At one or other point of time, you might have seen a state machine. A state machine is a machine that moves from one state to another state in response to triggers, as I just mentioned earlier also. Every React component, you can treat it as a state machine. A component may contain several children, then also it is a state machine. That means your entire UI application, you can regard it as a state machine. Being it is a state machine, it responds to triggers. The components respond to triggers. They move from one state to another state in response to those triggers, but conditionally. It is not that for every trigger they behave. For example, now I am looking outside through this window. There is metro train coming into the station. There is a lot of wind. The trees are dancing like anything. These are all various triggers, but I am not responding to them. But the moment I see that there is a lot of rain or something, I may suddenly take a decision like, okay, let me start home now itself. I may take some decision. Same thing, right? Every one of us, there are lots of events, lots of triggers that occur, but we choose to respond to only some of them. Same thing here also. In case of ReactJS or in case of UI applications, these triggers are essentially the events. When you click a button, when you change the content of a text box, when you select a different option among the drop-down list, or when you move from one radio button to another radio button, in all these cases, it is basically they are events, and those events can act as the triggers for our state machines. The most important thing is that when we move from one state to another state, means when the state is updating, it won't happen synchronously. Rather, it happens asynchronously. It happens asynchronously. In ReactJS, the state updations always occur in an asynchronous way. What does it mean? You know English word synchronous, right? Synchronous means, you know that word, right? Chronology, chronic. When you look at all these things, synchronous means in time. That chron is related to some time. Synchronous means in line with time. Basically, if I say something, you do that immediately. If I say something, you immediately do it, and you come back and say like, I have done it. Then I tell the next thing. Then you do it and you come back. This is synchronous thing. When you speak over telephone, typically it is synchronous communication. I say hello, then wait. The other person says, hello, who is this? That person waits. Then we say, hi, I'm Krishna, I am calling from blah, blah, blah. So this way, we pause for each other responses when we are talking over phone. That is synchronous communication. Whereas in asynchronous communication, it is like WhatsApp chatting. I put a message, I put next message, I put next message while he is responding, or he may not respond. He may respond at a different points of time. There is no synchronicity here. I say something, good morning, he may not respond. I wait for a few minutes and I say like, okay, once you see this message, please call me back. Still he may not respond. He may not even see that other person. At some other point of time, when I am busy with something else, then he put a message saying that, sorry, I didn't see your message. Is it a good time to call you back? This is all asynchronous communication. In synchronous communication, you can predict. In asynchronous communication, you cannot predict. You cannot predict. State updations happen in asynchronous manner means you may trigger the state updation, but you do not know, you cannot wait till the state updation is completed. You cannot wait till the state updation is completed because you don't even know when it will be completed. You may not know when that action would be completed. This is theoretical stuff, right? When we actually see for ourselves, we get to know more about this. But remember, state updations in ReactJS components happens in an asynchronous manner. Okay, this is one important. The other one is like, by the design, the stateful components of ReactJS, they follow a life cycle. There are different varieties of steps in that. Broadly speaking, there are 3 phases: mounting, updating, and unmount. Means when a text box is added to the UI screen, when it is appearing, you say like it is mounted. It is mounted. If you know the HTML, DOM tree, and etc., when an element is added to the DOM tree in the knowledge of ReactJS components, we say the UI or that particular control is mounted. In the sense that component is mounted. After once it is mounted, then we will be able to see it. And if you're just only seeing it, nothing happens. If I do something with that, it may change its state. That is updating phase. It may keep on updating every time you do something. And finally, at some point of time, you may remove that phase or you may move to some other phase. Then this element will be removed from the DOM tree. Then we call it as unmount. Basically, it is like born, live, and die, essentially, right? Live is not one single activity. It's like living means you do a lot of things till that entity is died. Same thing here, mounting, updating, unmount. In good olden days, when we had class-based React design, we used to have a lot of interceptors, the the lifecycle handlers, to handle each of those things. If you want to do something before mounting, you need to inherit and override a method. Immediately after mounting, again some other method. Updations, few methods. Before unmounting, one more method. Immediately after unmounting, some more method. You need to inherit, right? You will have to inherit a class and override the methods that you'd like to override. It used to be that way, but now it is no longer. We got a feature called React hooks. Now we got a feature called React hooks. This React hooks feature provides a way to handle the component lifecycle. Instead of extending the class and overriding these things, you can simply use these hooks. In this particular session, we'll be looking at 2 of them. One is use state, another one is use effects. It is customary that all these hooks are named as if like use XYZ. So in this case, it is use state and use effects. When you the use state hook that helps us in defining the state and updating the state. Essentially, that is that is at the corner, that is at the central stage. The use state hook is the one which you'll be using to make any component as a stateful component, because using this only you'll be able to define the state and their state transactions also. There is one more thing, that is use effects. Since I said, as I said already, the state updations happens asynchronously. When state updations are happening asynchronously, as I mentioned, you do not know when it would be finished, when that state updation would actually finish. But you are interested in doing something immediately after the state updation. Immediately after the state updation, you would like to do something. For example, you have a page where there is a button to unsubscribe. So I click on unsubscribe. User clicks on the unsubscribe button. Once that unsubscription happens, then you want to say thank you, would like to see you again in future. But to say that, you need to wait till that unsubscription process, that routine completes. You do not know when it completes because it is asynchronous. So in such kind of situations, we have this use effects. So on behalf of us, the ReactJS system itself will be observing, will be watching the state updations. And once the state updation completes, then it can execute a piece of code that we may provide. For that to happen, we use this hook called use effects hook. It helps in post state updations. Once the state updation is completed, if you want to do post that, then you'll be using use effects. Many of the applications of ReactJS definitely use these two fundamentally, right? Without these two, you typically cannot develop any useful application. All right. So I think the next bullet is repeated. Sorry for that. So because of this use state and use effects, we can also establish a communication from the child component to their parents. Whenever state updates in the child component, we can also propagate that to the parent. That way, we can establish two-way communication between parent and child components. All right, so this is the theory. There is no other theory. From now onwards, we'll only see the, we'll just look at the illustration, like how we actually get these things done. So I'm going to the next slide. So here we have a simple, component. Look at this code keenly. There is something we are importing, use effect, use state from React, which we haven't done yesterday. Next line, function, task, props. I think this is familiar to us. Here, this is a function called task, means component name is going to be task. You see that capital letter T. And it is also accepting the properties, immutable properties that I said yesterday, so that you can make use of those properties within this component. Then the third line is having something new, but at least we can observe that there is something called use state, which I talked about. Then we have a block of code, which is defining an arrow function called onDateChange. Next block of code is about use effect. Again, we just refer to it. Then comes the return statement. In the return statement, you have an empty, a root element, in which we have some HTML markup. And finally, we are exporting the component. I think that is also a typo. It is not export default summary, rather it is export default task. I'll correct it later. Sorry for that. The last line is not summary, rather it should be task. It might be there in every slide from here. Really sorry for that. So if you observe keenly, the difference between yesterday's component and today's component is that in yesterday's components, the component functions were just only having return statements. Whereas here, apart from return statement, we are also having something more. That's how the stateful components look. Stateful components have a lot of code other than just return statement. Return statement returns the markup. That markup is only to establish the presentation. It just appears on the screen. But if you want to do with that if you do something with that, we need to have some code that manipulates its state. That is what we are having additionally compared to the yesterday's code. Now let's go through these lines one by one carefully. So observe the highlighted piece of code. Function task props that return statement with one root element and exporting that component. Again, I'm sorry for that summary. It is not summary, rather task. Right. So these, whatever you are seeing highlighted, nothing new to us. It was there yesterday also. And within the that return statement, within that root element, what we are doing, we are basically adding some HTML markup. What is that markup here? It is an input element. This is an input element. Yesterday also we had something similar to this. This time the type of the input element is date. So this is basically a date picker. When we run this, we see a date picker. That's it. This is what we have. But this date picker, what do we want to do with that? When I change the date, we want to do something. If when I click on date picker, it shows the calendar, right? I may select some other date. What should happen then? You want to do something. If I want to do something, you need to make it stateful component. Look at the highlighted code now, line number 1, first line. So what we are seeing there, we are importing something called use state. If you want to convert any component into stateful component, you must have use state being imported. Once it is there, next step is use that hook and define a state variable. You remember, we have properties which are immutable, whereas state variables are not immutable. They are state variables, means their value can vary from time to time. So in the input of type date, when I select either today or yesterday or some other date, I want to know that date so that I can do something with that date. Means I need to have a variable to hold the selected date or to hold the current date that we are showing in the date picker. That means we need to define a variable. Instead of defining it as a normal JavaScript variable, if you make it as a JavaScript variable, it still works, but it works as a JavaScript application. That variable will not be attached to the actual component. We want to connect these two. So for that, in order to define such a kind of a state variable, I look at the highlighted code. We are using that use state hook. In order for using this thing like use state, you need not to pass anything. An empty parenthesis is also just fine. Then the date constraint is treated as if like it is not initialized. This is not initialized, means on the screen you'll be having a date picker, but no date will appear. Unless you select a date, you will not see any today's date or yesterday, nothing will appear. It is like it may appear as if like YYDDMM, something like that. You can also initialize it if you want. If you want to assign any default value for any state variable, if you want to assign any default value for a state variable, you can also do that. Here you see in the use state, I am passing a default value. The default value can be of any type. You know, JavaScript or ECMA is not really a typed language. So if I look at this code, line 3, I am defining a constant called date. What is its type? Nobody knows. Depending on the value that you are assigning, it assumes the type. Like Python, these are all what we call as duck type languages in a way, right? Dynamic languages are duck type languages. You know, a duck, no duck. I'm talking about duck, right? The living thing. No duck will have a label on it saying that I am a duck. How do you identify something as a duck? If it is walking like a duck, if it is quacking like a duck, it becomes a duck. That's it. Same thing here. What is this date? If you assign a string, it is a string. If you assign an integer, it is an integer. If you assign a number, another number, it is a number. That is what we mean by dynamic language. Types are dynamic. So what is this date is to contain use state default value. What is that value? Any value you can pass. You can pass integers, you can pass floats, you can pass doubles, you can pass booleans, you can pass strings, you can pass JSON objects, you can pass arrays, anything. In this case, what I'm passing a simple string. New date gets you the current date. To ISO string will get a string format of it in an ISO format, where it will be shown as if like year followed by month followed by day followed by hours, minutes, and second. That is the format. We just want to show the date thing only. So we are taking the first 10 characters. We are taking the first 10 characters, that substring. Means the date is essentially a string with 10 characters, 4 years, 4 characters for year, 2 for month, 2 for date, and 2 hyphens. 10 characters. So that means the effect of the line that is being highlighted as of now is that the date, right, the date attribute, sorry, state variable is declared and initialized with the current date. That is just a variable. How we attach it to the UI so that it will appear on the UI? We need to assign it to the input that is there in the markup. So how do we do that? Now you look at the highlighted value towards the bottom. All right, so here you can see here that the input now is having a value which is as connected to this date. The date, this date are the same. Whatever date variable we are having here is the one we are assigning to the, as if like it is a value for this input control. Observe these curly braces. If it is not curly brace, date is just a normal string, literal. When I put it in the curly braces, it is like a date variable whose value it gets it from here, which is initialized with this specific thing. So that means if you just run only this much of code on the screen, if you run only this much of the code on the screen, you will be having a date picker. It will show current date. That's it. Nothing happens. Whatever I'm not highlighting, whatever is grayed out is not required for this to work. You need not to import use effect. You need not to write any of this code. You need not to write this piece also. It still works. But only thing is that it only appears as a date picker. Nothing happens. If something has to happen, means whenever you change the date in the date picker, if something needs to happen, you'll have to provide a callback. In any event-driven programming, in any UI program, you always see these callbacks, right? Even when Priyanka is developing that admin UI using that Python, some ticket or something, there also be the same thing. Again, if you click what you want to call back. If you drag what you want to do. If you double click, what do you want to do? If you focus, if you blur, if you change, for every event, you can add a callback so that they behave the way you want. So in this case, whenever the value of the date picker changed, means when the user is changing the value of the date picker, what do you want to do? You'll have to specify the callback function. As I mentioned, JavaScript VCMA supports the so-called arrow functions. You can write a normal function, but for the better readability, you will use these, what do we call, these are more expressive, right? You will be using this arrow function. They are like lambdas of Java, lambdas of Python, as I mentioned yesterday. So on change, you will receive that event and you want to do something with that. As of now, I am not highlighting it. This is the format. What do you want to do here? That is your choice. In our case, we want to call this function. Whenever there is a change, we want to call this function. This function name can be anything. For readability's sake, I'm writing it is on date change so that I know it is easy for me to read and understand. So whenever this function is called, whatever is this E, that is event, essentially current event, will be passed here, and whatever you write in the body of the function will get executed. Means if I assign that here, right? If I assign this as the onChange event handler, every time a user changes the value of the date by using the date picker, this function means this function gets executed. If you remember yesterday, I was changing the date, but it is not changing. Even though I am picking a new value, it is not showing up. Even in the times also, like from time to time, I was changing from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. Let's say. Even though I'm selecting it, it is not appearing on the text box. Why? Because the user has changed the value in the date picker, but this value, the actual date attribute, date variable is yet to be updated. Unless this is updated, it will not change here. Unless this is updated, it will not change here. So if you want to see your changes, whatever you made as changes, if you want to see them for yourself, you have to do something. You need to update this state variable. Updating state variable is not like I cannot write like date equal to whatever new. That won't work. That won't work. That only changes the JavaScript variable value. It will not propagate that variable value to the actual user control. If I want to do that, then I need to have the so-called mutator of the state variable. If state variable name is date, then its mutator is set date. If it is ABC, the mutator name is going to be set ABC. Mutator name is going to be set ABC. It's not that you are writing a new name here. Essentially, like when you call use state, it will return a tuple. It returns a tuple. The first of the tuple is the attribute state variable. Second of the tuple is its mutator. You can give any name for that. Typically, we name it as like set blah blah blah. Right? What this fellow does, this guy will actually update the state machine. That means it actually updates the state of this date variable, and once that updation is completed, it will also reflect here. It will also reflect here. That is why we call it as asynchronous. If it is only updating this variable value, it will happen immediately. But it will take some time to go through the entire DOM tree and see like where are those UI elements and updating their values. It takes a lot of time. If it is doing synchronously, then your UI looks as if like it is stopping every time. The moment you click, it freezes because it is doing something behind the screen. If it is that, if you do it synchronously, that's what happens. If it is asynchronous, while you can still use your UI, behind the scenes, it is updating the state. Behind the scenes, it is updating the state. That's what we mean by asynchronous. So when I say set date, it not only updates the date variable, but also updates the UI. Updates the UI because these two are connected here already. They are bounded already. That's the job of the set date. So if I want to really update this date whenever it is changed by the user, then what I need to do in the callback function, I will have to call that set date operation. I'll have to call this set date operation. Where is that date value? The date value is in this event, in the HTML or in the DOM events. There is a property called target, nothing to do with ReactJS. It is basic HTML. There is a property called target. In every event object will have a target, like where exactly this event occurred and what is its current value. It gets that value. That means if I change the value in the date picker, that value is being stored, is available in this form. That is what we are passing it on to the set date method. Means whatever is the new value that is entered, it will be assigned up. It will be updated here, as well as it will update it in the UI. Both the places it updates. It updates in the both of the places. Let's say after that updation, if I want to do something, I'm not sure when exactly if I write some code immediately after set date, it executes immediately. But by that time, there is no guarantee that the date actually updates. As I mentioned, it is asynchronous. This runs in its own path. The rest of the code runs in another path. I want to do something like once the state is updated, I want to do something. If I want to do such kind of stuff, as I mentioned already, we need to use effects, After Effects, kind of. Right? We need to use this use effect. How do we use it? Simple. You just call use effect by passing a callback to that. Essentially, an arrow function which do not take any parameters, and that's it. It is having something like this. Remember, When I write use effect and I pass a new function, that function will have, the use effect is accepting two parameters. One is that function, one part is that function. Second parameter is an array, but it is optional. Second one is optional, whether you give it or not doesn't matter. So what happens is, like, if I'm not giving this array here, if I'm only giving the function, what happens is this function gets executed immediately once the component or the space is mounted. If you want to do something immediately after mounting, only you write this function. You do not write any arrow. You do not write any array after that. But if I want to do something even after initial mounting, then I'll be using that array. Okay, we'll do that. Now, first thing is, like, here I am saying in the array, I am specifying that date is one component I want to watch for. Basically, we are telling the ReactJS that please watch out for updations in date. This is an array. You can give comma separated list of any other state variables, any number of state variables you can give there. Specifying what that mean really. If a state is changed in any of those variables, if any of those variable values change, then execute this function, whatever is that function. So now it is up to us to define that what that function is. So what is that function I am doing here? In this function, I am doing something interesting. There are properties, right? Somebody will pass these properties. In those properties, we are expecting a method called update date. Basically, when we build this component, this is a reusable component, isn't it? This is a reusable component. Means we want to sell this component or we want to donate this component. Whenever you sell a product, do you give user guide, right? The assembly instructions or usage instructions. Same thing here. When we give this task component, when we publish it, then we also publish a user guide API specifying that if somebody wants to use this task component and if they want to get notified whenever the date is changed, date of the task is changed, then as part of the properties, they must send update date attribute. They must send a property called update date of type function. That's all we need to document. Then whoever is using this task will be, right? Whoever is using this task will be sending across this property. If this property is a function type, I am saying whose function it is, whoever is calling this task. Who can call the task? It's parent only. Obviously, it is parent only. So the parent is passing a function, and I'm calling that function by passing this data, whatever data I'm having. It's again a typo, I guess. It's not data, it is date. It must be date, right? So what I'm doing here, I'm calling a function of the parent by passing this new value of the date. How I can say it is new value? Because this function is all guaranteed to be executed. This function is guaranteed to be executed only after state updation because it is written as an effect. Means once the variable value is changed and the UI value is changed, after that, if I want to tell my parent also that this is the new value, this is how I do it. That means I'm able to communicate back to the parent. In other words, we established two-way communication. Parent is passing properties to the child is passing this date back to the parent by calling one of its functions, whatever function it will say. This is how we establish the two-way communication. That's it. With this, we have a full-fledged stateful component ready. Here it may look very simple, just only date. Even if you are having 100 state variables, the thing that you do is exactly the same. All right. So before we go to summary, let us try a few things over here. Ask me if you have any questions in between. So what I'm doing is now let me create a new thing that is task.js. I want to create this specific component, whatever we just talked about. So what is the basic thing? I need to create a function, name it as task, accept props, right? And it must return what it returns, something, and that something is always going to be an empty element of this tags. Maybe here date appears. Let me write just like that. And finally, you export the task. That's it. This is the basic functional component definition. What I do now is in the index.js, yesterday we had all these things. What I do is here, instead of passing the app, let me pass this task. Right, I have imported the task here, and in the root element, I am rendering the task element that we just created. Let's see what is the impact at this point. Right, so let me start this. All right, so we can say like here date appears. That's what happened in our index.js file. We only had task, and what the task is having only this much. So that's what we are seeing here. Now instead of that, let me have a real input element of type date. Of type date. Now you got the date field. There is no default value. Even if I do something, nothing actually happens over there. Right? After this, nothing happens. Now, if that value is changed, I want to print somewhere. Let's say I want to do something with that. So if that is to happen, then what I need to do? I need to add on change, and here receive that event and do something. Let's say console.log date changed. This much I have written. Okay. So where do I see those logs? I should go to DevTools. If it is Chrome, it will be on DevTools. So I'm increasing the font size so that you can see. So I am changing it into, let's say, some other date. You can see date is changed. You can see that date is changed. Let me change it to maybe some other thing. Date is changed. Again, it is saying. Not only just want to see that date is changed as a message, I want to see the new date. How do I get the new date? All I need to do is like get that event, whatever event you have here, right? That E is event. Events target and its value. Now let's see what happens. Let me reload just for the sake. Let me select this. You can see 2024-701. This is the ISO format. That is what the date picker of HTML uses. All right, so you can see this is coming over there. But I want to do something with that. All right, I'm able to get it, but I want to do something with it. For example, just before this, below this, I want to say you selected so on so date. I want to say that. Here we are only saying selected. Where is the date? If I want to have it, I need to have a variable for that. All right, I need to have a variable for that. So let me create a state variable. What is that state variable name? Date. And how do I get it? By defining it as use state. All right, so I have a variable called date here. So here I would be saying something like this. You selected what? This is, let me put a BR tag so that it will be, yeah. So now again say this, let me change this value. You selected, nothing is saying, even though it is coming here, nothing is being shown here because this date is bounded to this place, but not bounded to the input element. If I need to bind it, then I need to say its value is this date. This is not sufficient. We need to do it one step at a time. Now let me see what is happening. So I am selecting something else. Still it is not showing. Does that mean, is it not working? Let me give a default value for this. Then you can see that the default value is appearing immediately because this is the value assigned to date, and that is what is being shown here, is appearing. All right, so I have a variable called date here. So here I would be saying something like this. You selected what? This is the variable. Even if I give a proper value, let's say 2023, month of 6, 13 date. This is proper date. You can see that it is appearing. I have assigned a default value in a proper format, and that is being recognized by this input element, and it is showing it here. After this, I am changing it. It is showing the changed value, right? This is showing the changed value, but it is not showing. Why? Because this date is used to as an input as of now. It is being shown as part of the input element. When I make some change, nobody is changing the state. Unless the state variable date is changed properly, the input element will not get that propagation. That would not get that propagation. Nobody is getting that propagation, right? This date, they are not updated. Let me change it to something else. Let's say 15th. It is still 13/6, 13/6, not 15. Let me say 30th. Here you can see JavaScript variable is changing, but not the UI. Because the state machine did not receive the triggers. Nobody is asking it to change the state. We are only changing the variable internally. If you want to change the state, what I said, we need to create a function for that. For example, here on date change is the function, so that I can write elaborate code rather than writing inline, right? Rather than writing all these things here, I can shift it to this place so that I can write multiple lines. And here simply I call on date change. Same behavior. You do not see any different behavior here. Cannot read properties of under. Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot to pass this event object. Let me rerun again. So let me change this to, let's say 6. It is changing here, but it is not changing here. I hope you understand this point, right? If you want to update the component, you need to change the state of the component. The state is here, state variable is here. Even if I say date equal to this, right? I'm assigning the new value to the date, and let me print the date. The interesting thing is that you will see that here I am changing it to 8. Immediately what it is saying, assignment to a constant variable. Okay, that itself is failed because this is defined as a constant. You cannot even assign. Even if you make it as a let and make this change, it still won't work. The only way you can make the state changes is by calling set date. But where is that operation? From where you'll get that operation? Here you need to capture that second element of the tuple. You can give any name. Better you just say set date, and then you pass it on to this fellow. Then you pass it on to this fellow. Now what happened? We got the date variable, and we are updating the date variable by calling its corresponding mutator in a callback function. And that callback function is assigned assigned to onChange event handler. Means all the dots are connected, but still there is one issue. Let's see what actually happened so far. I'm saying like 8th. Now you can see it is changed to 8th. This is changed to 8th. Here also you can see it is 8th. Here it is printing 13th. Here it is printing 13th. Let me say 30. Now it is printing 8th. It is printing 8th, the old value. What does it mean? After calling the set date, I'm printing the date. Means I'm expecting that the new value should be printed here. Let me say new value, because we already updated, right? That is what we have updated here. And then I want to print new value. That is what we want to do. So if I try, let me try this again. Now, what is the new value? 16th. It is changing here, but it is saying new value is still 13th only. What we are expecting 16th. Now let me do one more thing. Let me say 25th. It is changing to 25th, but it is showing the old value, that is 16th. That means it is one step back. It is always one step back. If we are in Wednesday, living in Wednesday, it lives in Tuesday. If we move to Saturday, it lives in Friday. Why it is happening? Because just because you call this set date method, it doesn't mean that it will really update the date and then come to line number 7. That would never happen. It initiates the date updation on one side, and parallelly, immediately it also comes here. It just only initiates the state updation, do not complete it. There is no guarantee that it completes. It may complete, it may not complete. It depends on the time. So it may or may not complete the date updation, but it immediately executes this line up. Because of that, we are having this kind of a lag. Because of that, we are having this kind of a lag. So how we solve this problem? If you want to write this code, if you want to get the new value of the date, then you wait till the date is updated. How do we do that? That's where you will be writing use effect. This is what you need to do. What is that effect? First, you need to specify a function. What do you want to do? And when you want to do. We want to say, whenever the date is changed, we want to do something. What is that want to do? What is that we want to do? Just want to print. All we want is, we just want to print it. That's all. Whatever we wanted to print, the new value, instead of doing it here, we are doing it in the use effect, so that it actually takes place only after the date state variable date is actually changed its value. It is somebody is watching the values of date. Once this function is completed internally, the value changes, and once this value is changed, the first argument, that arrow function, gets executed. Now let's see, will it really solve our problem? Let's say I'm changing it to 1st. Now it is June 1st here, June 1st here, and also June 1st here. That means we solve the problem. We solve the problem, right? The only one more thing that we tried in the slides is like, if I want to pass this new date value, to whoever is calling this task. Who is calling the task? This fellow. This fellow is the passing the task. What I want to do is like, I want to print something here. Function. Once date is changed, let's say that is the function. I want to get that date. We'll say I want to print, say like console log, thanks, you changed the date. Let's say I want to say that to what, to which date. Maybe I want to have a variable here. Let new date. Initially nothing is there, whereas once this function is called, we want to say new date equal to whatever date we pass. You change, thanks, you change the date to new date. This is what we want to say. This is what we want to say. That means this is, we are calling this task, or we are rendering this task. The task will have a date, right? Every task will have some date. And every time that the date in the task is changed, we want to print this. We want to print this. Means the element, that is the child element called task, will have to come back and execute this function whenever its date is changed. Means it is from child to parent communication. It is from child to parent communication. How we can do it? Basically, you just pass this function itself to the child as a property. Let's say on date updating. Let me check what is the name that we have given here. Update date. Okay. Let's say update date is the property name, and what is that function? Once date is changed. This is the function we are passing to the task. It goes as a property called update date. So all I do is like here, instead of printing all this, I say from the props, there is something called update date. and you pass this date. Now it is guaranteed, right? When it is executed, when this is executed, the date is being passed. What is the value of this date? New value only, because this is going to happen only after updating the date. So it is always like whenever date is updated, it will call this function, means this is the function it will actually call, means this is the code that gets executed. Let's see if that really happens or not. Right. You see, immediately you are seeing, thanks, you change the date to blah, blah, blah. Why it is happening? As I mentioned, this, whatever function you are writing over here, this executes, sorry, not here. Whatever function you write in the use effect would get executed immediately after the mounting. Means once you open the page, immediately it happens once. And since after that, whenever there is a change in this watching objects. So this is happening immediately. You may wonder like why it is happening twice. This is because we are currently running in the development mode. Currently we are running in the development mode, and also we are running in the strict mode. Let me say I'm not going to have the strict mode. Then you see what happens. You have seen it only once. It is basically in the case of when we are running it in the strict mode on a development center, it happens twice for a very good reason, to help the developers only. But in production, it won't happen. The same code in production won't happen. This double mounting will not happen in production code. Only in the development code it happens. So don't bother much about it. Now what I'm doing, I'll be changing the date to, let's say, 22nd. Now you see, thanks, you change the date to 22nd. Who is printing it? I'm not printing it in the task. The child object is not printing anything. You can see that there is no console message. We just only call this function, and whoever is the parent, whatever they are doing in that function, that works. What am I doing here? The date variable of the child is being passed on to the new date variable of the parent. Means I'm able to establish communication from the child to the parent. This is how we establish two-way communication. Two-way communication. I think that's it. That's all we have done in this particular illustration. All right. So before going to summary, let me see if we have any questions. Right. Any questions from anyone, please? Any questions, Sumant? Yeah, Priyanka, you have a question.
No questions as of now.
No. Okay, okay. Any questions, Sumant?
No question.
Perfect. How about you, Kumar?
No question.
Perfect. And finally, Vinesh?
No questions, Krishna.
Very good, very good. So try these things on a simple project on your machine so that you can digest all these concepts. So let me just summarize things once before we close the session. So ReactJS supports both stateless as well as stateful components. We have seen them just now. The stateless component never changes its state. Yesterday we have seen. Stateful component changes its state in response to triggers. In our case, we have seen those triggers, we have seen those state changes, and etc. Both components are defined as functions. We have seen that even the stateful component is also created just as a function. Why this point is being highlighted is because if you are working on a legacy project of ReactJS with version below 16, you would not see this code. You would be seeing some code related to classes. Even if you look at our own projects, older projects, we were using classes. Of course, we are migrating to the React hooks now, but that was the case. All right, so stateful components are essentially state machines. So like any other state machine, they will have a state. They transition from one state to another state conditionally in response to one or other trigger, but the transition is asynchronous. Transition is asynchronous. It is to make the UI to appear smoothly without having any hiccups. So even if the transition takes, let's say, 1 minute, If it is not asynchronous, for that 1 minute, the UI would get frozen. To avoid that, everything is asynchronous here. So we have seen that stateful components have life cycles, mounting, updating, and unmounting. Use state is the one which we use to define the state as well as updating the state, the state variable as well as the mutator, means date, set date. And use effects are this function is helpful to handle any state, anything after the state updations. And using this mechanism, we can actually establish two-way communication between parent and children. All right. So that's it. I'll be editing these slides. We have small mistakes here and there, right? When I say small mistake, it is essentially this fellow. It is not task. This is supposed to be task, not summary. And this is date, not data. For some reason, it cropped in like this. So I'll make those changes and share those slides. And yeah, that's it. All right. Same references like what we have studied. All right. So any last set of questions before we close? Perfect then. So we are done for the day. So tomorrow we'll be looking at something called property drilling and reducers, a little more advanced concept, which makes you not only manage the state of a single component, rather manage the state of the entire application. Entire application state management, if you want to do, we use something called reducers. All right. There used to be something called Redux framework in the past. People used to use React along with Redux. Now there is no need for you to use Redux. You can still use it, but a lot of things you can just accomplish just by using React only, using that concept called reducers. So we'll be looking at that part tomorrow, the third and last session, at least in this series. Okay. Thank you very much. We are done. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, thank you all.